Today I'm going to talk about how to get good at crowd work. What's up, everybody? Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world, with another Comedy Tip Tuesday. That's right, it's Comedy Tip Tuesday once again, and we're going to talk about how to get good at crowd work. But first, I want to reference what I said last week about not doing Comedy Tip Tuesday. You guys really came through with some suggestions. Actually, what I'm going to talk about is based off of one of the questions, and it ties in with another question. And so as long as you guys continue to help me out as far as giving me ideas, I'm going to keep doing these. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate how many people told me that they really do like these, and that does help to keep me going. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's just true. So before we get started, please hit the like button. Comment if you have a question for an upcoming, and please subscribe if you haven't already. So the first question is from Victor Villani. Sorry if I'm murdering your last name. I think that's the way it is. Or Victor Villani. You say tomato, I say tomato. Oh, just playing. But anyway, Victor says, great stuff, Ty. Thank you, Victor. Question about hosting. This came up at a mic I recently did in Tyler, Texas. How much time should a host do in between comedians? Okay, this is the rule I've always gone by. In an open mic, especially, as little time as possible. In between comics, you want almost no time, because a lot of times, I don't know what things are like in Tyler, but here in Vegas, LA, and Phoenix, which are the places that I've done the most mics, it usually is going to be over 20 comedians, and that's going to be a long night for everybody. So as short as you can do in between comics, that's what I would recommend. Sometimes I just bring comics up rapid fire, just one after the other. If somebody really bombs and the room needs some help, then go ahead and do maybe a minute or two at the most. But nothing like some of these places I've been, they'll be doing 5-minute sets in between. And it's like, it's not about you as the host. So you need to remember that if you're hosting, or the person that's hosting would probably want to keep that in mind. Make sure everybody stays happy. Make sure the night doesn't go longer than it has to. That would be my advice. Same with doing actual shows. You know, you don't want to do a bunch of time in between, because the night's going to run long enough. Servers are being paid. Bartenders are being paid. Audience members have babysitters, so don't make the night any longer than it has to be. Unless it's your own show and it's all about you. Sometimes the host is the actual show. Next question comes from a dude named Anwar. Anwar is my friend. I like Anwar. I'm not sure. I have one friend that's Anwar specifically, and Anwar, I'm not sure if you're Anwar. Anyway, you know I know you. You know I like you. So here's Anwar's question. First off, thank you for these. I'm learning every week. My question is, when you're bombing, how long should you stay up there? I believe in getting the fuck off stage, because if shit isn't working, why subject the room to that? But I know some believe in using the whole time to tough it out. Should you eat shit the whole allotted time, or respect the time of the venue and other comics? You know what? I would tell you, Anwar, honestly, you waited in line just like everybody else. You sat through everybody else bombing or doing whatever they were going to do. So you use your time as well. With open mics, don't put too much pressure on yourself to do well or to kill it. Work on learning. And maybe you having to deal with bombing is going to teach you something. Maybe you'll come up with something off the top of your head, even if it's to save yourself, that'll be really funny. And I always say, when it comes to mics, if I come up with just one good thing, then I consider that to be a win. So maybe look at things that way for yourself. Don't worry about other people's time. Worry about your time and worry about your growth. And with the way that they're usually set up, these mics, we know how much time we want people to be up there anyway. So if you do your whole 5 minutes, you're not costing the room anything. We had planned on having you up there that long anyway. You know, with Ocha Tai on Thursdays, my room, I'll sometimes make it a little bit fun if I think somebody's eating it too bad, but that's not about them wasting time. It's just about me being able to hopefully inspire them to think of things in a different way and come up with some new stuff. And so if I can help out with that, I'll definitely do that. But as far as the rest of the mics go, use your time to your advantage and make sure that it's worth it for you. You had to invest time getting there. You had to invest gas money. You had to make sure that you signed up by the time you're supposed to sign up. So do take advantage of your time. That would be my advice on that. If on a particular night you're just having a rough time and you really don't feel like being on stage, go ahead and get off, but do that for you, not because of anybody else. The next one comes from LD Fab. I'm not familiar with LD Fab. If we've met in person, I'm sorry, but I don't think we have. Either way, here's LD Fab's question. As the best LGBT comedian in the world, do you have some advice for an inexperienced, apolitical, cis, straight comic newbie trying to use their insight regarding the left and or right charades without coming across as pandering to one group's individual side of ridiculousness? Plus, without overdoing the POC, people of color, for anyone that's not familiar, POV, point of view. Much love, Ty. You're a real one, in my personal opinion, whose bits reach pretty much everyone without having personal bias. I've been field testing some material in my private and or professional life, and sometimes my delivery is on point, sometimes it's way off. I don't think I'd have the guts to step on stage yet. Thanks in advance. You're amazing. Well, thank you for all the compliments. I definitely do appreciate that. To answer your question, I think you need to start getting on stage as soon as possible. I know you say you're not ready yet, but like I always say, you're never going to be ready. So you might as well just jump on there while you're not ready and start working your stuff out. As far as worrying about coming off as pandering to one side or the other, I really wouldn't worry about that. Write the jokes you feel are going to be funny in the way that you think they're funny. Don't have any real commitment to either side, since you don't have any commitment to either side. Like, keep that in mind. It gives you a lot of leeway what you're doing because you don't really have a stance. Like with me, the reason I'm able to do the stuff that I want to do is because there are things that I feel strongly about, but most things I feel like are take them or leave them. And there's very few things that I think that you can't joke about or that I think are sacred or words that I won't use. And so for me, that gives me a lot of freedom to be able to say the things that I want to say and do the things that I want to do and not have any real problems as far as grappling with this is too much this side or too much that side. I've often said that for me, a lot of times where I find the joke is somewhere in between what I actually feel and what I really don't feel. And for some reason, somewhere in that gray area is usually where I find the joke. So you might find that something similar works for you, where the joke isn't necessarily what you think or what your personal feeling is on anything, is just you actually making a joke, which to me are the best jokes, because then you're not really going out of your way to be an edgelord or hurt anybody's feelings, but at the same time, you are making people laugh and making people think. So I personally, if I were you, would find strength in the fact that I don't care about either side. And as far as people of color point of view, don't worry about that. That's something that's being celebrated in the industry right now. So if you're a person of color and you have a particular point of view that makes you unique in that way, or gives you a way of expressing yourself to people where maybe they can learn a little bit about your particular culture or your particular thinking or the way that you were raised, then I don't see how that's going to be a bad thing. So just play with that and really look at the audience. The audience will let you know when they're tired of something. Like, I've noticed that if the audience gets tired of something, there'll sometimes be a shift in their seat or a point where you can see on their face that they're tired of that. And then that's when I move on. I do let them dictate in that way because the audience will let you know when they've had enough. But I wouldn't worry about that in general. As long as they're rocking with it, you continue to rock with it. That would be my honest advice on that. If you decide to, maybe sometime send me a clip of what you do when you actually get on stage, and I'll give you one freebie where I'll check it out just to see if I see what you're talking about. That is an offer I'll make to you. You can hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. I might not see it at first, maybe post in my YouTube comments, hey, I just sent a video to your DM in whichever platform, and then I'll know to check it out. So this next question actually leads into what I was actually going to talk about or want to talk about. So it's from Mark Ass Johnson. I love Mark Ass Johnson. His name is Mark Johnson, but he goes by Mark Ass Johnson. He just made it up. It's funny. I love it. And Mark says, I'm a comedian and I have written jokes, but I have more fun bullshitting on stage. I feel like my biggest strength as a comedian is how I'm quick-witted. So I stopped doing written jokes to force me to incorporate that more into sets. Now I'm trying to figure out a way to do both. But when I prepare for my sets, I don't freestyle enough. Do you have any tips for how to do planned jokes with off-the-cuff jokes? You know what, Mark? Actually knowing you and seeing what it is you do, I can see what you're saying, and you are really good at riffing and you are really good at off the cuff. So I would say for right now to really work on your written material, because the off the cuff stuff, you're never going to lose it. It's always going to be there. So work on your written material. That would be my advice for you personally, knowing you as a person and as a comedian. Because you're funny enough in regular life. Like I said, that's not something you're going to lose. That's not something you really have to work on. And in your confidence in knowing your set, then that's where you're going to be able to find your openings for where you can do the off the cuff stuff. And the audience will just offer it to you over time. So, Toothless Old Comic says, and this one is really what made me want to talk about what I want to talk about. How about doing something on improvisation and crowd work? You're very good at this, and I would love some insight into your process and how you got better at it. So, as I've discussed before, when I first started doing comedy, I had very bad stage fright. So what I had to do was get really good at actually doing written material, because I knew that I didn't have the confidence to be able to do crowd work or improv at all, or do in the moment type stuff. So I got really good at that, and then people would heckle me, and it wasn't all the time, it wasn't terrible, but it would happen, and I got really good at shutting them out, which is also a very good tool. So I know that I have that ability to be able to shut people out and just do what I have to do. So then at one point there was an audience that forced me to do crowd work, and I ended up doing really well at it, and then that's what led me to being able to do things the way that I do now. But it was from having that confidence and knowing that I could go back to my written material. Because the thing that people want to remember with improving or crowd work is that there are going to be certain audiences that completely aren't good for it. There are certain audiences that aren't going to give you anything. And then there's certain audiences, like I posted a video yesterday where I showed this woman that was being particularly resistant, but she kept interrupting me, which would make me think that she wants to do crowd work. And it was just a really annoying situation. But I handled it really well. That's what a lot of people said. I personally didn't think I was as fun as I could have been, just because I had other stuff going on, which is beside the point and not an excuse for anything. But I don't think I was as fun as I could have been. I'll put the clip right here. But what you don't see is I cut out that in between, like, dealing with her, I was also going back to rehearsed material, actual material. So that kept the audience on my side, because they saw that I was actually able to do stand-up and I was actually making them laugh with the written material that I was doing in between. And then I would go back to dealing with her, go back to dealing with the audience. On that night, I did a lot of crowd work throughout my entire set. That whole weekend, I did a lot of crowd work just because I felt like it. But that is what I wanted to talk about, is how you get good at that. And to me, the way that you really do get good at that is by being able to control it, and by being able to control not only yourself, but also your emotions. Because if you find yourself getting legitimately mad at the audience, then it's not going to work out, because the audience is going to be able to sense that. There were points where I got legitimately annoyed with the woman that kept interrupting me, but I wasn't letting her control my emotions. Like, yeah, I would get annoyed, but I'd still keep it fun, and I was still able to say things, and I was able to say some really vile things to her. But the audience knew that I was joking. The audience knew that I was having a good time. So you want to keep that in mind. Also, you want to keep in mind that it's okay to be patient, and not everything that you say in crowd work has to be funny. Like, sometimes you have to let a couple of things just be completely informational and even somewhat bomb, or not do as well as maybe a joke would do, because you're trying to find what's actually funny and what's happening in the room, or what's going on between you and a particular audience member. So there's also that part of it too, where you want to have the confidence to be able to sit back and say, okay, what's actually happening here? And be very engaged in your thinking and your listening. Don't only be thinking about what you're going to say next, because then it's like any other conversation where you're not paying attention, because what you're saying to them isn't necessarily matching up with what they're saying to you. The audience is going to see that. The audience is going to be like, okay, this isn't really anything. And so be an engaged listener. And like I said, don't be afraid to be patient and actually listen to them and respond to what it is they're saying. You will find the funny. Have faith in that. You have to have a lot of faith in yourself to really be good at improv/crowd work. You really do have to relax into what it is you're doing. And also, if you're not headlining, be very careful about this, because some headliners really don't like the openers and the features to do a lot of crowd work. I personally don't like when my features and openers do a lot of crowd work, because a lot of times I don't know how to settle the audience back down when they're done, or let the audience know that maybe the headliner's not going to want to deal with that, because sometimes I just want to do material and sometimes I don't want to mess with the audience. So it really is at my discretion. And some people would think like, well, I'm a comedian and I should be able to do whatever I want to do. Well, in a lot of cases, I bring my feature and I bring my opener, or I have approval over the feature and the opener. So you can have that attitude if you want to, but if you do a bad enough job at it, then I'm either going to ask the club to change you out, or I'll just never use you again in the future. And I don't care if people feel any particular way about me saying that. At the end of the day, I have to deal with the audience as the headliner when they're at their drunkest, when they're at their rowdiest, when they're their worst behaved of the night. You know, it's what I have to do. So I don't need the people that go up before me, the support, making things any more difficult for me than they're already going to be anyway. And so I don't mind if the feature and the opener do a little bit of crowd work, but if all they're doing is crowd work and it gets the audience in that mood where they think that all we're going to do is crowd work, then sometimes I don't want to deal with that. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, maybe save that for when you're headlining, or for when you're working with headliners that are just like, do whatever you want as far as crowd work. Because there are those headliners too. I'm just not always one of them. Sometimes I bring people along that do a fair amount of crowd work, but less and less. More and more I like the comics to do. And also because I want to see what the comics I bring along actually bring to the table in the way of material. So that's another reason that I asked that. But yeah, that would be like my main points for comics and doing crowd work, is just be a good listener, be patient, be in control of your emotions, and only do it if everybody else that you're on the show with, or the person that you're working for, the headliner and the club, are cool with it. That would be what I would say are the keys to doing good crowd work. So if you guys have any other questions for me, leave them down below in the comments. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for paying attention, and thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.